My dad gave my brother my VP position and called me a failure. I resigned, leaving them with the server keys. They forgot I controlled. After the system crashed, they begged me to return. I told them my rate was 50% of the company. Hey Reddit, grab a snack because this is going to be a long one. I'm still processing everything that happened, but I needed to share this somewhere because, honestly, it's the most satisfying thing I've ever experienced in my 31 years on this planet. So I, 31 male, just destroyed my family's business. Not on purpose at first, but when they handed me the detonator and begged me to press the button, I figured why not? They had it coming. Let me back up and give you some context about the Johnson family dynamic, because without it, this story makes no sense. My dad started Johnson Industrial Solutions about 25 years ago. Started in our garage with a couple computers and a dream, grew it into a legitimate mid-sized company specializing in industrial automation software. We're talking about systems that run manufacturing plants, distribution operations, supply chain management, the kind of software that, if it goes down, entire factories stop producing and companies start hemorrhaging money by the hour. Our client base included 3 Fortune 500 companies and about 40 mid-sized manufacturers across the Midwest. Growing up, I was always the tech kid. While other kids were playing sports or chasing each other around the playground, I was in the garage with Dad, learning how servers worked, how networks connected, how to write code that actually did something useful. By the time I was 15, I was helping troubleshoot client issues after school. By 18, I was basically running our IT infrastructure as an unpaid intern while finishing high school. I still remember the first time I saved the company from a major disaster. I was 17 years old, home on summer break, when our main database server started throwing corruption errors. Dad was panicking, calling expensive consultants who couldn't figure out the problem. I sat down at the terminal, spent 6 hours tracing the issue, and found a memory leak in a third-party module we were using. Fixed it myself. Saved the company probably $50,000 in emergency consulting fees and potential client losses. Dad's response? A pat on the shoulder and good work, sport. No bonus, no recognition, nothing. Just business as usual. My younger brother Kevin, he was the golden child, the charming one, the one who played football, got the girls, made our parents proud in all the visible ways that relatives could see at Christmas dinner. He was 3 years younger than me, but somehow always managed to be the center of attention. Kevin had this natural charisma that I never developed. He could walk into a room, and everyone would gravitate toward him. He told stories that made people laugh. He remembered names and details about people's lives. He had this effortless way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. Me? I was awkward. Still am, honestly. I preferred computers to people because computers made sense. They followed rules. They didn't play favorites or make you feel invisible. The favoritism started early and never stopped. When I got straight A's, my parents nodded and said, "That's expected." When Kevin scraped by with C's, they threw him a pizza party for trying so hard. When I built my first server rack at 16 from salvaged parts I'd collected from electronics recyclers, Dad barely looked up from the TV. When Kevin scored the winning touchdown at some JV game, Dad was crying tears of joy in the stands. You get the picture. Classic golden child situation that would make any family dynamics expert cringe. The pattern continued through every milestone of my life. When I got accepted to State's computer science program with a partial scholarship, my parents said it was a good practical choice. When Kevin got accepted to a private university that cost 3 times as much, they threw him a graduation party with catering and invited half the neighborhood. After high school, I went to State for computer science, paid my own way through scholarships and part-time work because Dad said the company couldn't afford to help with tuition. Meanwhile, Kevin went to that private university where he majored in business administration and minored in frat parties. Full ride from the bank of Mom and Dad. I worked 25 hours a week during the school year to cover my expenses. Kevin called home whenever he needed spending money, and it appeared in his account within hours. I graduated with honors and minimal debt because I'd busted my rear end. Kevin graduated with a C+ average and a sense of entitlement that would make a trust fund baby blush. 4 years later, I graduated with honors and immediately started working at Johnson Industrial Solutions full-time. Started at the bottom despite literally building half our systems during my teenage years. Fine, whatever. I figured I'd prove myself and work my way up. And I did. Over the next 8 years, I became the backbone of that company. I'm not being arrogant here. I'm stating facts that multiple employees would verify if you asked them. I designed our entire server architecture from scratch, created the security protocols that protected client data, wrote custom software solutions that landed us 3 of our biggest contracts. When our main competitor tried to poach our clients with a fancy cloud-based solution, I built something better in 6 months. Single-handedly, while also managing our existing infrastructure. There was this one time, about 4 years in, when we almost lost our biggest client, a manufacturing company that accounted for 22% of our revenue. Their CTO was shopping for alternatives because our reporting dashboard was outdated. I spent 3 weeks working 18-hour days building a completely new analytics platform, custom visualizations, real-time monitoring, predictive maintenance alerts. The CTO was so impressed he signed a 5-year contract extension. Dad mentioned it in a company meeting as a nice technical upgrade, without using my name. Kevin, who had literally no involvement, somehow got thanked for relationship management that kept the client happy. Dad promoted me to Director of Technology after 5 years. Still not VP, but okay. I figured I was building towards something. The title came with a modest raise and an office with a window. I told myself to be patient. I told myself hard work would eventually be recognized. I told myself that family loyalty meant something. I was wrong about all of it. Then Kevin graduated. This was 3 years ago. Kevin had bounced around after college, tried a couple sales jobs, failed at a startup that Dad quietly funded and never mentioned again. At 25, he was basically unemployed and living in an apartment that our parents paid for. The startup failure was particularly embarrassing. Kevin had convinced Dad to invest $60,000 in a revolutionary app that was supposed to connect party planners with local vendors. The app was essentially a worse version of Yelp with a party theme. It launched, got maybe 200 downloads, and died within 8 months. Dad never asked for the money back, never even mentioned it. Meanwhile, I'd been asking for a modest equipment budget increase for 2 years and kept getting told the company couldn't afford it. Dad's solution to Kevin's unemployment? Bring Kevin into the company as my equal, Director of Business Development, a position that literally didn't exist until Kevin needed a job. I swallowed my pride. Fine. Kevin could handle the business side while I handled the tech side. Division of labor. Made sense on paper. Except Kevin was terrible at his job. Like, genuinely bad. He'd schedule meetings with potential clients and then forget to show up. He'd promise features our software couldn't deliver without consulting me first. He'd take prospects to fancy restaurants on the company card and then lose the deal anyway. I watched him blow a deal worth potentially $200,000 in annual revenue because he promised the client we could integrate with a legacy system that didn't have API access. When the client's technical team asked how we'd accomplish this, Kevin just said, "Our tech guy will figure it out," and moved on. The client walked away because they correctly identified that Kevin had no idea what he was talking about. But Dad couldn't see it, or wouldn't see it. Every failure was a learning experience, or building relationships for the long term. Every success, even minor ones, was proof that Kevin was finding his stride. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks keeping the technical side running while cleaning up Kevin's messes with clients he'd overpromised. Got the same salary I'd had for 2 years. Same title, same office. When I asked Dad about advancement, he gave me this condescending smile and said, "David, technical people don't usually move into leadership. You're valuable exactly where you are. Don't worry about titles. Don't worry about titles." Right. Easy to say when your last name is on the building. What really got me was the server room situation. Our entire company ran on infrastructure I had designed, built, and maintained. Every piece of software, every client database, every communication system, every backup protocol. I knew every password, every encryption key, every failsafe. Nobody else did because nobody else had ever bothered to learn. I'd tried training people multiple times. I created documentation that nobody read. I offered to run workshops that nobody attended. I practically begged for a junior admin who could learn the systems and provide backup coverage. But Dad always said we couldn't afford to dedicate resources to IT training when there were more pressing business needs. Translation: Kevin needed a bigger marketing budget for client dinners that went nowhere. So for 8 years, I was the single point of failure for the entire company. The only person who could access our core systems. The only one who knew how everything connected. And nobody seemed to care about that vulnerability because, in their minds, I'd always be there. I'd always be the reliable one. The one who fixed problems without complaint. The invisible backbone of Johnson Industrial Solutions. That was about to change. 6 months ago, Dad called a company-wide meeting. "Big announcement," he said. "Time for Johnson Industrial Solutions to enter a new phase of growth." I figured it was going to be some new contract announcement, or maybe a merger discussion. Instead, Dad stood at the front of our conference room with Kevin beside him and dropped a bomb. "After careful consideration, I've decided it's time to restructure our leadership team. We're creating a new vice president of operations position to oversee both our technical and business development divisions. Someone who can bridge both worlds and lead us into the future." My heart started racing. Vice President. After 8 years of proving myself, finally getting recognized. I'm proud to announce that Kevin will be taking on this role, effective immediately. The room went silent. I watched as my coworkers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Jake, my closest work friend, actually winced. Everyone knew Kevin couldn't find the server room without a map, let alone oversee technical operation. Kevin stood there grinning like he'd just won the lottery. That same smile he'd had when he got the car for his 16th birthday, while I was driving a 12-year-old sedan I'd bought myself. That same smile he'd had at every Christmas when his pile of presents was twice the size of mine. Dad continued with some nonsense about Kevin's business acumen and relationship-building skills being essential for the company's growth. How Kevin's fresh perspective would complement our technical capabilities. How this was about the future of Johnson Industrial Solutions. When he finished, Kevin said a few words about being honored and committed to excellence. The same generic phrases he'd probably pulled from some business book he never finished reading. I sat there frozen. 8 years. 8 years of 60-hour weeks, of building systems from nothing, of saving contracts Kevin nearly lost, of being the backbone of this entire operation. And my reward was watching my younger brother get promoted over me. After the meeting, I went to Dad's office. I needed to understand what was happening. He was sitting behind his desk looking satisfied with himself when I walked in. Dad, I need to talk to you about this VP decision. He sighed like I was a child interrupting his important adult time. David, I know this might be hard to hear, but Kevin's been showing real leadership potential lately. The company needs someone who can see the big picture. Big picture? I've been seeing the big picture for 8 years. I built the systems that make this company function. And you'll continue to do that. You're invaluable in your current role. My current role that Kevin is now in charge of? Kevin will handle the strategic direction. You'll handle the technical implementation. It's a natural partnership. Dad, Kevin doesn't understand our systems. He couldn't tell you the difference between a server and a sandwich. Dad's face hardened. That's exactly the kind of attitude that concerns me, David. You're technically gifted, but you lack the people skills to lead. Kevin brings something different to the table. What does he bring exactly? Failed sales pitches? Missed meetings? That startup you funded that went bankrupt in 8 months? That's enough. Dad stood up, his face red. I've made my decision. Kevin is VP. You can either support that decision and continue being a valuable member of this team, or you can let your jealousy destroy your career here. Jealousy? Dad, I've given everything to this company. I've missed holidays, canceled vacations, worked through illnesses. I've been here every single time there was a crisis, at any hour, on any day. You've given your technical skills, which is exactly what we pay you for. But leadership requires more than just knowing how computers work. Kevin has vision. He has charisma. He has what it takes to be the face of this company. I stood there processing his words. The face of the company. That's what this was about. Kevin looked good in a suit and could shake hands with clients. I was the awkward tech guy who actually made everything work. You think I can't lead because I'm not charming enough? I think you're a brilliant technician who should focus on what you do best. Stop trying to be something you're not. That's been your problem since childhood, David. You always wanted to be something you weren't instead of accepting who you are. That one hit different. 20 plus years of feeling invisible in my own family, condensed into one condescending sentence. I walked out of his office without another word, went straight to my car and sat there for an hour, replaying every sacrifice I'd made for that company. Every weekend I'd worked, every vacation I'd skipped, every relationship I'd neglected because there was always another crisis to solve. And my reward was being called a brilliant technician who should know his place. That night, I called my girlfriend Rachel. She'd been listening to me complain about my family for 3 years and had the patience of a saint. She was a nurse, worked in the ICU at University Medical Center, and she understood long hours and feeling underappreciated. They promoted Kevin over you. Yep, the Kevin who thought SQL was a type of fish until last year? That's the one. David, what are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'm done being invisible. Those words surprised me even as I said them, but they felt right. For the first time in my life, I was done accepting whatever scraps my family decided to throw me. The next few weeks were educational. Kevin started his new role with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, calling meetings to discuss synergy and operational efficiency, while clearly having no idea what any of our systems actually did. He'd pull me into his office to explain basic concepts that anyone who'd been paying attention for the last 3 years would already know. What's a firewall? How does our backup system work? Why can't we just move everything to Google Drive? I'd explain things as simply as I could, and he'd nod like he understood. Then he'd turn around and present those same concepts to Dad like they were his original insights. I've been analyzing our infrastructure, And I think we're over-reliant on localized server solutions. We should consider a distributed approach to risk management. That was literally my words from a proposal I'd written 2 years ago. A proposal Dad had rejected because it was too technical for him to understand. Dad ate it up. Every meeting, he'd praise Kevin's strategic thinking, while I sat there watching my own ideas get repackaged and credited to someone else. But here's where things got interesting. Kevin decided he wanted to modernize our infrastructure. He'd read some article about cloud computing and decided we needed to migrate everything immediately. Never mind that our clients had specific security requirements that made certain cloud solutions problematic. Never mind that our current systems were stable and efficient. Kevin wanted cloud because cloud sounded impressive. He brought in outside consultants without consulting me. These guys showed up with fancy presentations and buzzwords, promising to revolutionize our operations. They quoted a price tag that made my eyes water, $350,000, and a timeline that was completely unrealistic. When I raised concerns in the planning meeting, Kevin cut me off. David, I appreciate your input, but we need to think bigger here. Your legacy systems have served us well, but it's time to evolve. Legacy systems. The systems I'd built from scratch. The systems that had never had a major outage in 8 years. Kevin, if we rush this migration, we're going to have serious problems. Our clients depend on uptime. Any disruption could cost us contracts. That's why we're bringing in professionals. He gestured to the consultants, who nodded sagely. These guys have done this dozens of times. We're in good hands. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd see reason. He was nodding along with Kevin like everything made perfect sense. I want David fully cooperative with the transition team, Kevin continued. That means handing over all system access, documentation, and passwords so they can do their assessment. There it was. The moment everything crystallized. They wanted my keys, not because they valued my input, but because they needed my access to proceed with a plan that would probably blow up in their faces. For 8 years, I'd been the gatekeeper of this company's most critical infrastructure. I knew every backdoor, every encryption key, every fail-safe protocol. Information I'd never fully documented because Dad had always said we couldn't afford to dedicate resources to that kind of administrative overhead. Now they wanted me to hand all that over to outside consultants so Kevin could play tech visionary. I smiled and said I'd prepare everything they needed. Then I went back to my office and started planning. Over the next 2 weeks, I did 3 things. First, I documented everything. Every system I'd built, every process I'd created, every line of code that kept the company running. Not for them, for me. I wanted a complete record of exactly what I'd contributed before everything went sideways. Second, I started quietly backing up my personal files and any proprietary work I'd developed on my own time. Legal had always been vague about IP ownership for stuff I'd built outside working hours, so I made sure I had copies of everything that was clearly mine. Third, I began preparing my resignation. This wasn't revenge yet. This was self-preservation. I knew Kevin's cloud migration was going to be a disaster, and I didn't want to be the scapegoat when it failed. Better to leave on my own terms than get blamed for someone else's incompetence. The final straw came on a Thursday afternoon. Kevin called another all-hands meeting, this time to discuss organizational restructuring. Dad was there, beaming with pride as Kevin presented a new org chart. My position had been eliminated. Well, not eliminated exactly. Restructured. The Director of Technology role was being replaced with a Technical Support Coordinator position, reporting to the outside consulting team. Same responsibility. Lower title. 20% pay cut. And I'd be reporting to people who'd been at the company for 3 weeks instead of 8 years. After the meeting, Dad pulled me aside. David, I know this seems like a step back, but think of it as an opportunity. You'll be working closely with experienced professionals who can help you grow. Help me grow? Dad, I built everything they're supposedly experts in. Your attitude is exactly the problem. You're resistant to change. You think you know better than everyone else. That's why you've plateaued here. That's why you've never advanced past a certain level. You're a technician, David, a good one, but you're not a leader, and you need to accept that. Plateaued? I've been running your IT infrastructure single-handedly, while Kevin couldn't find the printer without a map. Kevin is a leader. You're a technician. There's no shame in that, but you need to accept your place in this company. My place. My place was apparently as a glorified help desk employee at my own family's company, while my brother, who could barely send an email without assistance, played executive. Is this really how you see me? I asked quietly. After everything I've done? Dad looked at me with something like pity. David, I love you, but you've never had what it takes to lead. You're good at following instructions and solving technical problems. That's valuable. But Kevin has the charisma, the vision, the leadership qualities that this company needs to grow. I know it's hard to hear, but sometimes we have to recognize our limitation. I just stared at him. The new position comes with a retention bonus if you commit to staying through the transition. $15,000. We really do need you for the technical handoff. Think about it. He walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway, realizing that I'd spent 8 years building a company for people who saw me as nothing more than a useful tool. That night, I typed up my resignation letter. 2 paragraphs. Professional, courteous, and effective in 2 weeks. Then I deleted it and wrote another one. This one was 1 sentence. I resign. Effective immediately. I submitted it at 6 a.m. the next morning. Emailed it to Dad, Kevin, and HR. Then I turned off my phone, drove to Rachel's apartment, and slept for 14 hours straight. When I finally woke up, I had 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The panic had begun. Here's the thing about being the only person who knows how all the systems work. When you leave, nobody else can fix anything. And I mean anything. Day 1 of my absence, the backup server started throwing errors. This was actually a minor issue, a scheduled maintenance task that needed manual approval because I'd never automated that particular step. Would have taken me 5 minutes to resolve. Without me, nobody knew what to do. They called the consulting team, who spent 8 hours trying to diagnose the problem before accidentally making it worse by restarting services in the wrong order. Day 2, the email server went down. Not because anything was actually broken, but because nobody knew the admin credentials to restart the service. Those credentials were in my head, along with about 200 other passwords that I'd never been asked to document. The consultants tried to reset the password and managed to lock themselves out entirely. Day 3, their biggest client called threatening to terminate their contract because their monitoring dashboard had stopped updating. This was a result of an API token that needed to be refreshed every 90 days. I'd always handled it. Nobody else even knew it existed. Jake kept me updated through texts. He wasn't asking for help. He understood why I left, but he wanted me to know what was happening. I appreciated the play-by-play. Kevin just spent 45 minutes screaming at the consultants. It was glorious. Dad is in his office with the door closed. Haven't seen him come out in 3 hours. The consultants are talking about bringing in a forensic data recovery team. They think we might have been hacked. They hadn't been hacked. They just finally realized that maybe the guy who built everything from scratch knew things that weren't written down anywhere. My phone was blowing up. Dad, Kevin, HR, coworkers I barely knew. Everyone wanted to know where I was and why I wasn't helping. I ignored all of it. On day 4, Dad showed up at Rachel's apartment. I watched him through the peephole, knocking and calling my name for 20 minutes before finally. He left a handwritten note under the door. David, please call me. We can work this out. Dad. I threw the note away. Day 5, Kevin sent me an email threatening legal action for sabotage and theft of company property. I forwarded it to a lawyer friend who laughed and said they had nothing. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I just left. The fact that I was the only one who knew how things worked wasn't my problem. I hadn't deleted anything, hadn't damaged anything, hadn't taken anything that belonged to the company. I just stopped showing up. Day 6, the company's main production server crashed. This was the big one, the server that hosted all their client applications. Without it, half their customer base had no access to the software they were paying for. The crash happened because of a memory management issue I'd set up a monitoring alert for years ago. The alert had been going to my email, my personal email, because I'd never trusted anyone else to respond to it properly. When I left, the alerts kept coming, but nobody was there to see them. I watched the emails roll in as the server slowly degraded over 72 hours before finally giving up. Jake texted me in a panic. David, everything is on fire. Kevin's been in Dad's office screaming for 2 hours. The consultants are saying they can't recover the system without the encryption keys. Nobody knows where they are. I knew where they were. They were in a password manager that only I had access to. A password manager secured by credentials that existed solely in my memory. Day 7, Dad called. I actually answered this time. David, his voice was hoarse. He sounded like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk. We talked plenty. You made your thoughts about me very clear. I was wrong. About Kevin. About the restructuring. About everything. Please. The company is falling apart. We need your help. Sounds like you should call those consultants Kevin hired. They're professionals, right? David, please, I'm begging you. Name your price. My price? Whatever you want. Your old position back. Double your salary. VP title. Anything. Just come back and fix this. I let the silence stretch out for a long time. Long enough that I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, waiting. I don't want my old position back, Dad. Then what do you want? 50% of the company. He laughed, then realized I wasn't joking. That's insane. That's my life's work. I can't just give away half of it. Then good luck with your server recovery. I hear the consultants are making great progress. David, Be reasonable. I'll give you 25%. That's more than generous for your age and experience. 50%. And Kevin goes, completely out. No position, no office, no involvement. Clean break. I can't fire your brother. He's family. So am I. But that didn't stop you from calling me a failure who should know his place. Silence. Long, painful silence. 50% and Kevin out. Final offer. You have until midnight to decide. After that, I'm booking a flight to Seattle. I have 3 job offers waiting and I haven't even started looking seriously. I hung up. The next 18 hours were interesting. I know this because Jake kept me updated in real time. The consultants quit, just walked out. Said the situation was beyond their capability to resolve without access credentials they couldn't obtain. They also mentioned something about not wanting to be associated with the company when it collapsed. 2 major clients terminated their contracts. 3 employees resigned because they couldn't do their jobs without functioning systems. The company's bank called about a missed loan payment that had been scheduled through an automated system nobody could access. Kevin apparently had a complete meltdown in the parking lot, screaming about how this was all my fault and how I'd planned this from the beginning. Security had to escort him off the premises. At 11:47 p.m., my phone rang. 50%. Dad's voice was broken. Kevin's out. Whatever you want, just please come back. I want it in writing. Lawyer drafted agreement. Signed and notarized before I touch a single keyboard. We don't have time for that. The servers? Then I guess the servers stay down. I'll wait for the paperwork. David, please. We're losing everything. Midnight, Dad. Papers ready by noon tomorrow or the deal's off. I hung up again. At 11:58 a.m. the next day, I received an email with 3 attachments. A stock transfer agreement giving me 50% ownership of Johnson Industrial Solutions, Kevin's termination letter, and a formal apology letter from my father acknowledging his errors in judgment regarding my contributions to the company. My lawyer reviewed everything. It was legitimate. I drove to the office at 2 p.m., walked past the empty reception desk, past the darkened workstation, past the stressed-out employees who looked at me like I was either their savior or their executioner. Dad was waiting in his office. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. Kevin was there too, packing personal items into a cardboard box while shooting daggers at me with his eyes. David, Dad stood up. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. I was blind. I let my desire to see Kevin succeed cloud my judgment about who was really holding this company together. Save it. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to fix the mess you created. Kevin looked up from his box. This isn't over. You think you won? But you just destroyed this family? No, Kevin. You and Dad destroyed this family. I just stopped letting you destroy me along with it. He grabbed his box and walked out without another word. I never saw him at the office again. I sat down at my old workstation and got to work. It took me 4 hours to restore basic functionality, another 6 to get all systems fully operational. By midnight, Johnson Industrial Solutions was running again. But things were different now. Very different. Over the next 3 months, I implemented changes I'd been advocating for years. Proper documentation for all systems. Redundant access credentials held by multiple trusted employees. Training programs so I wasn't a single point of failure anymore. Professional IT staff who actually understood our infrastructure. I also restructured the company. Dad stepped back to an advisory role. I became CEO. We cut the dead weight, focused on our core competencies, and started rebuilding relationships with the clients we'd lost. Kevin tried to sue for wrongful termination. His lawyer laughed him out of the office when he reviewed the situation. You can't sue for wrongful termination when your termination was part of a negotiated agreement to save a company you helped destroy. The lawsuit attempt was actually pretty funny. Kevin hired some ambulance chaser attorney who sent us a cease and desist letter claiming I had coerced Dad into signing the agreement under duress. My lawyer responded with a 12-page breakdown of everything Kevin had done to damage the company, including the failed cloud migration, the lost clients, and the security vulnerabilities his consultants had created. We also included transcripts of Kevin's parking lot meltdown that several employees had recorded on their phones. The lawsuit disappeared within 2 weeks. Never heard another word about it. What surprised me most was how quickly the company culture changed once Kevin was gone. Employees who had been walking on eggshells suddenly started speaking up in meetings. Ideas that had been shot down for years got implemented. Morale went through the roof. Jake told me that on Kevin's last day, someone had left a cake in the break room with a note that said, "Good riddance." Nobody ever figured out who did it, but I had my suspicions. The clients we'd lost during the crisis were harder to win back. 2 of them had signed with competitors and weren't interested in returning. But the third one, a manufacturing company we'd worked with for 6 years, agreed to give us another chance after I personally flew out to their headquarters and walked them through everything that had happened. Your brother really screwed you over, their CTO said after I finished explaining. He did, but he's gone now, and I'm making sure nothing like this ever happens again. We got their contract back, signed a 3-year extension on better terms than before. The financial recovery took about 4 months. Between the lost clients, the emergency consulting fees, and the damage to our reputation, we'd taken a serious hit. I had to personally guarantee a bridge loan to keep payroll running while we rebuilt. But we did rebuild, stronger than before. I brought in new people, competent people. Patricia as CTO, a CFO named William, who had actual financial experience instead of just a business degree and family connection. A sales director named Samantha, who closed more deals in her first quarter than Kevin had closed in 2 years. We also invested heavily in documentation and training. I never wanted to be a single point of failure again. Not because I was planning to leave, but because I finally understood that a company built around one person's knowledge isn't really a company. It's a liability. By month 6, we were profitable again. By month 9, we were posting record revenues. By month 12, we had more clients than we'd ever had before. The turnaround got noticed. Industry publications wrote about our Phoenix from the Ashes story. A podcast invited me on to talk about resilience and leadership. I declined the podcast but appreciated the recognition. TLDR. Spent 8 years building my family's tech company. Dad promoted my useless brother over me and called me a failure who should know his place. I quit, taking all the system access with me. When everything crashed, I demanded 50% ownership to come back. Now I run the company and my brother sells cars. Update. Hey Reddit. It's been about 6 months since I posted this, and people have been asking for an update. The company just had its best quarter ever. We brought in a new CTO who I actually respect, a woman named Patricia, who spent 15 years at a Fortune 100 company before deciding she wanted to work somewhere smaller. We've landed 3 major contracts this year, hired 12 new employees, and expanded into 2 new markets. The biggest contract was with an automotive parts manufacturer based out of Detroit. They'd been shopping for a new software solution for over a year, and every major competitor had pitched them. When they heard about our turnaround story, they reached out directly, said they appreciated a company that had been through the fire and come out stronger. That contract alone is worth more than our entire revenue from 2 years ago. Rachel and I got married last month. Small ceremony, just close friends and her family. Dad was the only one from my side who came. Kevin wasn't invited. The wedding was actually perfect. We did it at a botanical garden about an hour outside the city. 50 people, good food, great weather, no drama. Rachel's family is completely normal, which after my family feels almost surreal. Her dad walked her down the aisle. Her mom cried happy tears. Her sisters gave actually heartfelt toasts. Nobody tried to make it about themselves or start a fight. Dad behaved himself. He sat in the back row, kept to himself, and left right after the reception started winding down. He shook my hand before he left and said he was proud of me. I just nodded. Speaking of Kevin, I heard through the grapevine that he tried to start his own consulting business after getting fired. Some kind of business development service where he'd help startups find investors. It lasted about 4 months before he ran out of Dad's money to burn. Apparently the investors he was connecting weren't real, and the startups figured that out pretty quickly. One of the startups actually threatened to sue him for fraud. Kevin had been taking a finder's fee for introductions to investors who didn't exist. The whole thing collapsed when someone actually Googled one of the investors Kevin had mentioned and found nothing. He's at a car dealership now, selling used trucks from what I heard, making about $40,000 a year. A far cry from the VP salary he thought he deserved. Dad officially retired last month. He signed over his remaining shares to me as part of a buyout agreement we'd been negotiating. I now own 73% of Johnson Industrial Solutions. He moved to Arizona with Mom. Before he left, we had dinner together, just the 2 of us. He told me that watching me take control of the company was the proudest he'd ever been of me. Then he apologized again for how he'd treated me all those years. I always thought Kevin needed more help because he struggled more, he said. I didn't realize I was just making him weaker while ignoring the son who was actually building something. I appreciated the apology, but I also told him that apologies don't change history. They just acknowledge it. He nodded like he understood. Mom still tries to arrange family dinners where Kevin happens to show up. I've stopped attending those. Last Thanksgiving, she called me crying because I wouldn't come. I told her I loved her, but I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Kevin reached out once, about 3 months ago, a long email apologizing for any misunderstandings and asking if there might be a place for him at the company again. He'd been fired from the car dealership for falsifying sales records and was apparently struggling to find work. I didn't respond. Jake showed me Kevin's LinkedIn profile recently. He's listed himself as a business development consultant with expertise in corporate turnaround strategies. The irony almost made me laugh. One more thing worth mentioning. Last week, our biggest competitor reached out about acquiring Johnson Industrial Solutions. They offered $42 million. I told them no, not because I couldn't use the money, but because I built this company from the ground up, and nobody's taking it from me. Not my brother, not my father, not some corporate buyout firm looking for a bargain. This is mine. I earned it, and I'm keeping it. That's it for now, Reddit. Thanks for following along. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true. Today's story is about the family disappointment. The nurse son, the one who wasted his potential. His father built a real estate empire worth tens of millions. His brother got the VP title on day one, and when Joshua's daughter was born, he got a $20 bill in a generic grocery store card. But when his father showed up at his house with a loaded gun pressed to his 4-year-old's head, demanding he co-sign a fraudulent $2.3 million loan, this disappointment had already wired his entire house for surveillance, had armed backup 4 minutes out, and had been waiting for exactly this moment. What happened next sent his entire family to prison. All 4 of them. My dad yelled, "You choose, your loan signature, or your 4-year-old daughter's?" My own dad said. Mom just laughed and said, "Your life means nothing to us." My sister kept my daughter from running, and my brother forced the papers in my face. When I refused and tried to pull her away, everything went wrong in a second. The first thing I noticed when my father walked into my living room that day was how out of place his suit looked against everything in it. Custom Italian fabric against the secondhand couch Mara and I had picked up from a local listing 3 years back. His hand, the same one that taught me how to tie my shoes, was wrapped around a black handgun with the barrel pressed flat against my daughter's temple. Hazel was 4 years old. She'd stopped crying. She was frozen, wide eyes locked directly on mine, clutching her little blue plastic dolphin with both hands. Her knuckles were completely white. My sister Chloe was crouched right behind her, diamond rings glinting under the lamp, both hands clamped down on Hazel's shoulders so she couldn't run. She was whispering fake little comforts into Hazel's ear in that syrupy voice she only uses when she's performing. My brother Carter shoved a stack of legal documents into my chest, loan papers, $2, $3 million of co-signature liability, and held out a pen. My mother Diane leaned against my kitchen counter next to the bakery box she'd brought along as some kind of prop, and she was laughing. Not nervous laughing. Full, satisfied laughing, like she was watching her favorite show. "Sign the loan papers right now or else," my father said. Robert Whitmore, patriarch, community pillar, gun to his own granddaughter's head. I refused to take the pen. Carter shoved me back hard. I stumbled over my coffee table and hit the hardwood floor. The breath knocked straight out of my lungs. And then the gun went off. The sound was physical. It punched through the air and rattled the walls. Hazel crumpled sideways, slipping out of Chloe's grip and falling to the carpet in a heap. My brain went offline. There was maybe 2 full seconds of nothing. And then I heard her crying. She was okay. Robert had flinched when I lunged and fired wide. The bullet went into the ceiling. Plaster dust floated down over all of us like snow. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because to understand how a wealthy grandfather ends up pressing a loaded gun against a 4-year-old's temple in a suburban living room over a stack of paperwork, you have to understand the Whitmore family from the bottom up. You have to look at what was underneath the reputation. Hold on, let me jump in here. For the listeners, this is me, not the OP talking. I need a second because I want to make sure this lands right. Robert Whitmore, respected businessman, charity golf sponsor, the guy who got his own name on a hospital wing, just fired a gun inside his son's house with a toddler in the room. Diane's reaction was to stand in the kitchen and laugh. These 4 didn't lose control. This was the plan. Captain Legacy and the crew showed up with a bakery box and a loaded weapon like it was a normal family visit. Buckle up because the backstory is somehow worse. To the outside world, the Whitmore family was local royalty. My father built a commercial real estate development empire over 40 years. Office buildings, mixed-use properties, commercial leasing across 3 counties. The kind of guy you saw in the newspaper shaking hands with the mayor, his name on a hospital wing. People respected him. Behind the iron gates of the estate, the whole thing was a straight-up dictatorship. Carter was the golden child. Firstborn son, groomed to take over. Sports cars for birthdays, fully paid Ivy League tuition, vice president of acquisitions handed to him the literal day he graduated college, despite barely passing. He spent his days barking orders at men twice his age and running up the company card on lunches that stretched to sundown. Chloe was the princess, raised for one specific purpose: marry well and expand the family's social reach. She nailed it when she locked down Dylan, a successful investment banker. Their wedding cost more than most people make in a decade. And then there was me, Joshua, the middle child, the constant grinding disappointment. I never cared about real estate portfolios, or corporate acquisitions, or country club politics. I wanted to actually help people. When I was 18 and told my parents I was going to nursing school to become a pediatric nurse, you would have thought I'd announced I was joining a cult. The Thanksgiving dinner right after I got my nursing license is when I understood fully and finally what I was dealing with. I'd brought Mara, my girlfriend at the time, a public school teacher. My mother looked her up and down like she was inspecting furniture at a garage sale and sighed loud enough for the whole table. A teacher and a male nurse. How quaint, Diane said. Tell me, Joshua, how do you plan to survive on that salary? We don't subsidize mediocrity in this family. Mara squeezed my knee under the table. I kept my voice flat. We do fine, Mom. We enjoy what we do. Robert snorted from the head of the table, carving the turkey like it had personally insulted him. Changing bedpans isn't work. Carter just closed a $12 million deal this week. That's real work. You're embarrassing the Whitmore name. Same script every time. But I watched Mara absorb it across the table and made myself a quiet promise. We built our own life, paid for our own house, drove older cars, budgeted grocery trips, not a single dollar from them. And we were genuinely happy in a way I'm not sure anyone in that estate had been in a long time. When Hazel was born 4 years ago, I made the mistake of thinking a baby might soften them. I called from the delivery room, voice cracking with that specific tired joy you only feel in those first hours. Diane answered on the third ring, already put out. Oh good, tell Mara congratulations. I have to go. They're starting my highlights. Click. They didn't come to the hospital. 3 weeks later, a store-bought card arrived with a crisp $20 bill. Buy the baby something nice. Meanwhile, when Chloe had her 2 kids, Robert set up trust funds immediately, and Diane practically moved into Chloe's place to play the devoted grandmother for all her wealthy friends to admire. Hazel didn't exist to them because I didn't exist to them. I eventually made peace with it. Mara and I built a solid wall around our little family. Hazel became the center of everything. A bright, laughing kid who chased butterflies, collected seashells in a little bucket, and was completely certain dolphins were magical. I never argued the point. We started her college fund. We had everything we needed. For 3 years, genuine peace. I thought the worst they could do was ignore me. I was dead wrong. Pause for a second. Let me get in here because this next part is where things turn. Joshua has built an actual good life. Steady job, great wife, kid who collects seashells, college fund already started. He walked away from the empire, didn't take a dollar, and built something real with his own hands. And then, 6 months before that Saturday with the gun, his father showed up uninvited with a briefcase full of papers. Just walked in like the last 5 years of silence meant nothing. What follows is a story about what happens when a guy who's been underestimated his entire life finally stops playing defense. The nightmare started 6 months before that Saturday, on a rainy Tuesday evening. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the children's hospital. We'd coded a 7-year-old earlier in the afternoon, and my nerves were still completely raw. I turned onto my street and saw Robert's car parked in front of my house. Custom license plate, unmistakable. He was already sitting in my living room, completely uninvited, drinking the coffee Mara had nervously poured for him. He didn't stand up when I walked in. Didn't ask how I was doing. He pulled a thick stack of legal documents from his briefcase and set them on my coffee table like a subpoena. We're expanding operations. A major commercial development bid downtown, he said, slipping into his CEO voice without warming up. The bank requires all immediate family members to co-sign the guarantor forms to spread the liability matrix. It's a formality. I need your signature here, here, and here. I stepped forward and flipped to the second page. $2.3 million. Are you out of your mind? I asked. I'm a pediatric nurse, Dad. I make a decent salary. I'm not sitting on $2 million in assets. I am not signing my family's future to your corporate debt. The mask slipped. Under the confident businessman I'd feared my whole life was something darker, desperate and cornered and genuinely frightened. You owe this family everything, he said, his voice dropping. Every breath you take is because I put a roof over your head. You will sign this tonight. No, I said. Get out. He stood up so fast his chair scraped across my floor. He kicked my coffee table hard enough to send my favorite ceramic mug spinning off the edge and shattering on the hardwood. You ungrateful little coward. You have 24 hours to change your mind, or I swear I will ruin your pathetic life. He stormed out and slammed my front door hard enough to knock a framed photo of Hazel off the wall. Glass everywhere. That night, Mara and I sat at the kitchen table staring at the documents he'd left behind. She looked pale. Joshua, massive companies do not force estranged sons with modest salaries to co-sign multi-million-dollar loans unless they are completely out of options. Something is seriously wrong here. She was right. I took some of our savings and hired a forensic accountant to dig into Robert's company finances independently. Took 3 days to get the picture. The $2.3 million had nothing to do with a downtown development project. That was a cover story. Robert had a gambling addiction he'd hidden from everyone for over a decade, bleeding the company through offshore high-stakes games. But the dangerous part, he didn't just owe banks. He owed a man named Cameron, a violent operator connected to organized crime. If he didn't pay Cameron by month's end, things were going to get physical. His plan was to push through a fraudulent bank loan, using my clean credit history as the anchor, pay off his debts, and leave me holding the collapsing bag when it all fell apart. My own father was going to use his son's name and his son's family to cover his criminal debts. He would have watched us go bankrupt and lose our house and called it a necessary sacrifice. I didn't just call him to say no again. I went straight to a lawyer and sent a certified cease and desist letter. No further contact with me, Mara, or our home. Done. That was the exact moment the Whitmore family declared war. Wait. Let me step in because I need to appreciate this properly. The man's plan, his actual strategy, was to forge a loan application using his own son's identity to pay off mob debt, then walk away clean while Joshua's family lost everything. And when he got a legal letter saying no, the response was coordinated multi-front retaliation. What's next? Showing up to Hazel's daycare with a PowerPoint. King Whitmore thought a cease and desist was the opening move of a negotiation. The entitlement it takes to go from "I need your help" to "I will ruin you" inside 48 hours is genuinely staggering. Keep going. It gets worse before it gets much better. The retaliation started the next morning. Diane called and screamed until my eardrum rang. I told her I'd been dead to them for 30 years already and hung up. Blocked her number immediately. 2 days later, Carter showed up at my hospital. I was mid-shift on the pediatric floor, carefully checking the IV line on a frail 7-year-old leukemia patient, when I heard shouting in the hallway. I stepped out and found Carter violently shoving past 2 hospital security guards, face flushed red, suit jacket half wrenched off his shoulders. "There he is!" he bellowed, pointing a rigid finger directly at me across the entire ward. In front of nurses, patients' families, my colleagues. That's him. He's stealing heavy pain medication from the supply closet. My brother is a junkie. You need to drug test him right now. The hallway went dead silent. This wasn't just screaming. He was trying to take my medical license. He was trying to take away my ability to feed my daughter and pay my mortgage. Before Carter could get out another word, Julian, a hospital director, former military trauma surgeon, a man who had worked actual combat zones and was not easily impressed, stepped out of his office. He walked up to Carter and looked at him the way you look at something unpleasant on the bottom of your shoe. "Sir," Julian said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority, "I personally run full random drug tests on my entire staff monthly. This nurse's record is spotless. You are trespassing in a pediatric ward. Security will remove you now. If you resist, we are pressing charges." The guards grabbed Carter's arms, This isn't over, Joshua. We will ruin you, he spat as they hauled him backward toward the elevators. I was shaking in the hallway, but they weren't finished. Chloe went after Mara next, targeting her school directly. Overnight, anonymous emails went to the school board with detailed claims that Mara was emotionally volatile and prone to outbursts, with hints at an active child services investigation. The school knew Mara was a stellar teacher and didn't fire her, but protocol required formal documentation in her permanent file. That kind of flag follows a teacher for years. Mara came home with the printed emails in her shaking hands, a framed photo of Hazel pressed to her chest. They want to squeeze us from every angle until we just sign it to make it stop. I told her I wouldn't let them win, and I meant it. But what was happening inside me wasn't fire anymore. Something colder, a lot more focused. The final escalation came a week later. I walked out to the hospital parking garage after a late shift and found all 4 of my tires slashed straight through, rubber shredded, spray painted across the driver's side door in thick, dripping red letters. Sign it or accidents happen. I stood in that garage in the cold, the smell of aerosol paint burning my nose, and understood what had just shifted. They weren't threatening my finances anymore. They were threatening my life. I called Mara. Calm voice, careful words. Pack a bag. Take Hazel to her parents' place, 2 towns over. Don't post anything. Don't tell anyone the destination. Just go. She heard my tone and didn't argue. I stared at the red paint and made a decision. I wasn't going to file a police report that would sit on a detective's desk for 6 months. I wasn't going to apply for a restraining order that a man with criminal connections would treat as a speed bump. If the Whitmore family wanted scorched earth, I was going to be the one holding the match. My lawyer, Veronica, sat across from me and listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward. A restraining order is just paper to people with mob debts, Joshua. It won't stop them. What we need is to let them come to you, and make sure that when they do, they hang themselves so thoroughly that no defense attorney on earth can save them. We trap them. She made a call. That call connected me to Aaron, a former military intelligence officer running a private security firm. Aaron didn't do standard alarm systems. While Mara and Hazel stayed safe at her parents' place, Aaron spent 2 days turning my house into a surveillance fortress. Pinhole cameras fitted inside smoke detectors in the hallway. Wide-angle lenses concealed behind books on the living room shelf. High-fidelity audio receivers wired into the base of the kitchen light fixture. A small camera stitched carefully into the seam of Hazel's stuffed blue dolphin, the one she dragged everywhere. Everything fed in real time to a secure encrypted cloud server. Even if they physically destroyed every device in the house, the footage was already uploaded and beyond their reach. Aaron handed me a heavy silver pendant on a leather cord. It looked like a regular piece of men's jewelry. There's a wide-angle lens in the center, he said. Streams live via cellular data. More importantly, it has a panic activation. Pick a safe word, something you would never naturally say in a normal conversation. The moment you say it, my monitoring team bypasses 911 and dispatches directly to your location. Armed response in under 4 minutes. I rolled the pendant in my palm. Emergency assistance. Done. He typed it into his system without looking up. For the next week, I baited the trap. I made sure word reached a mutual acquaintance I knew would carry it straight back to Diane, that Mara was out of town for a weekend work seminar, leaving me home alone with Hazel all day Saturday. I knew they would see it as the perfect window. A man alone with a small child. Maximum pressure. Maximum vulnerability. I was right. Okay, stop. Let me talk to you for a second because I need you to appreciate this. Joshua spent 30 years being told he was the weak one. The disappointment. And these people, who built their whole identity around being smarter and more ruthless than everyone, could not conceive of the nurse son outplaying them. They thought money equals intelligence. They thought he'd fold. They had no idea he'd already spent 2 weeks wiring his living room into a broadcast studio. He didn't just set a trap. He invited them to step directly into it. Princess Country Club and King Whitmore walked right into a 4K recording. Everything that happens next is entirely their own doing. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. Hazel was on the living room rug building a block tower, working on it with that specific 4-year-old intensity. She'd been at it for like 20 minutes and had already rebuilt the base twice. I was in the kitchen pretending to read a medical journal, eyes drifting to the front window every 30 seconds. At 2:15 p.m., a black SUV pulled into my driveway hard and fast, bumping over the curb. All 4 doors opened at the same time. Robert with his leather briefcase, Diane carrying the bakery box, Carter cracking his knuckles, Chloe adjusting her sunglasses. They walked up my front path in a line. I touched the pendant under my shirt, breathed, opened the door. Robert pushed past me without any greeting. The others filed in behind him. Carter immediately positioned himself near the front door, folding his arms to block the exit. Diane walked into my kitchen and dropped the bakery box on the counter with a loud smack, scanning my clean home with open disgust. Chloe crossed into the living room and went straight for Hazel. "Hi, sweetie," Chloe cooed, dropping to one knee right next to my daughter and clamping both hands down on her shoulders. Hazel instinctively shrank back, gripping a wooden block tight. Robert set his briefcase on my coffee table, popped the latches, pulled out the stack of papers. "This ends today," he said, his voice dropping into that quiet register I always found more frightening than his yelling. "We are not leaving this house until you sign." "I told you I'm not doing it," I said, loud and deliberate, making sure every syllable reached the audio receivers in the ceiling. "That debt is yours. You gambled it away. I am not making my family homeless to cover your criminal mistakes." Diane laughed from the kitchen. "Your life means nothing to us. Trash like you owns nothing worth keeping. Sign it or we will take Hazel and call child services. And trust me, we have enough friends that it will stick." "You have no legal right to be in my home," I said. "Get out." Robert's face went through something I'd never seen on him before. The mask dropped completely, and underneath it was pure, unhinged desperation. He reached into his jacket. The gun came out slow and deliberate, and the overhead light caught the metal. He racked the slide, a bullet chambered with a sharp metallic snap. This was not a prop. "Here is how this works," he said, his voice completely flat. "You sit down at that table, sign every page I've marked, and then we all leave like one big, happy family." I reached into my pocket. Carter lunged so fast I didn't have time to react. He slapped my phone out of my hand, and it skittered across the hardwood and under the sofa. He shoved the papers into my chest. "Just sign the documents, Joshua. Stop being dramatic. This is a family matter." Diane smiled from the kitchen. Her eyes were bright. "We handle our own problems. We always have." I looked at Hazel. She was trembling. She'd stopped trying to understand what the metal object in her grandfather's hand was and had just gone somewhere else in her head, staring at the carpet with her dolphin still clutched in her fists. Robert stepped forward and lowered the barrel to the side of her head. "Sign the loan papers right now," he said, "or else." I looked directly into the hidden lens of the pendant on my chest. "Emergency assistance," I said clearly, every syllable. Robert looked confused. "What are you babbling about? Sign it." "I will not let you destroy her future," I said, stalling, counting seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. Robert's finger visibly tightened on the trigger. I lunged, threw my full body weight forward, aiming to knock him backward, putting myself between the gun and my daughter regardless of what it cost me. The gun went off. The sound was enormous and physical and wrong in a way that doesn't translate into words. Plaster rained from the ceiling. Hazel crumpled to the carpet, and my brain just flatlined. Then I heard her crying, screaming in pure terror, and I dropped to my knees and ran my hands over her head and her back and found nothing. No blood. Robert had flinched when I moved, and the shot had gone into the ceiling. Before he could lower the gun again, my front door came off its hinges. Not opened. Off the actual hinges, hit by a steel battering ram. The windows blew outward into the yard. A wall of black tactical gear flooded into my living room. At least a dozen SWAT officers, rifles raised, multiple red laser sights painting Robert's chest. "Police! Drop the weapon! Drop it! Now!" The gun clattered to my hardwood floor. Matthew, the squad leader, crossed the room in about 2 seconds and took Robert face first into the floorboards. Carter threw his hands up and started screaming in a pitch I'd never heard from him before. 2 officers swept his legs and put him down hard. Chloe released Hazel and backed against the wall, shrieking as an officer cuffed her from behind. Diane didn't get 3 steps from the counter before she was shoved against it and cuffed. I grabbed Hazel off the floor and pulled her into my chest so tight I was afraid I'd hurt her. I buried my face in her hair and just shook. She was okay. She was here. She was in my arms. Once the room was fully secured, Matthew hauled Robert to his knees. Robert's nose was bleeding onto my rug. He looked around at the tactical officers and found the composure to start talking. "This is a family dispute," he said. "He attacked me first. I was defending myself. You need to listen to me. I'm Robert Whitmore." I walked over and stood directly above him. I pointed to the pendant on my chest, then to the smoke detector, then to the bookshelf. "You didn't just threaten me, Dad," I said. My voice was completely steady. I didn't expect that. "You performed for an audience. Every word, every threat, that gunshot. It wasn't just recorded. It was broadcast live to a secure cloud server and to this police department in real time. They saw you pull the gun. They heard you put it against her head. They watched all of it." He followed my finger to the smoke detector. His eyes went wide and kept going. All the color left his face at once, like someone pulled a drain. Diane stopped laughing. Her mouth opened and nothing came out. Carter started hyperventilating on the floor. "Get this family out of my house," I told Officer Matthew. "Hold on. I need you to sit in that moment for a second. Robert Whitmore, 40 years of building an empire, 30 years of making his son feel like nothing, just had the entire picture explained to him by the guy he had a gun on. The smoke detectors were cameras. The bookshelf had a lens. The pendant was a live feed. His whole 'we handle family matters internally' plan was on a cloud server the police had been watching in real time. That is the face of a man who spent a lifetime underestimating the wrong person. The trial's even better." Pull up a chair. Final update. The immediate aftermath had this specific eerie quiet to it. Red and blue lights strobed across my street. Neighbors stood on their lawns watching the Whitmore family get walked out in handcuffs. Carter came out first, sobbing so hard he couldn't walk a straight line. As they pushed him past the porch light, I noticed a dark stain spreading down the front of his khaki pants. He wouldn't look up. Chloe came out fighting, screaming about her rights. The officer guided her head down and closed the cruiser door on her shrieks. Diane found my eyes as they walked her down the path. The viciousness was gone, replaced by something that looked like desperation, but wasn't really remorse. "Joshua, please, we're your family. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I turned my back and walked inside. I heard her through the wall before the car door cut her off. Robert was last. Silent. No arguing, no commands. Whatever fight he'd walked in with was gone. He shuffled past me looking hollowed out. Mara arrived 10 minutes later, having driven like a maniac from the moment Aaron's team alerted her. She came through the shattered doorway, dropped her bag, and we met in the hallway and just held each other. No words for a while. Veronica showed up while the investigators were photographing the bullet hole in my ceiling. She handed me a paper cup of water with the calm of someone who'd already reviewed the footage and liked what she saw. "The audio is pristine. The video is undeniable. They're buried, and they're not getting bail." 8 months to the trial. Their defense team tried every angle to get the footage thrown out, argued that recording in a private residence without consent violated state wiretapping law. Veronica dismantled it in about 20 minutes. When you force your way into someone's home to commit armed coercion against a minor, your expectation of privacy doesn't survive the door coming off its hinges. Every frame was admissible. The prosecution kept it simple. They set up a monitor in front of the jury, dimmed the lights, and pressed play. 20 minutes of silence broken only by the sound of my family destroying themselves in 4K. Robert pulling the gun. Diane laughing from the kitchen. Carter shoving me into the table. Chloe pinning my daughter still. 3 jurors covered their mouths when the barrel pressed against Hazel's head. When the lights came back on, Robert's attorneys were staring at their legal pads. You cannot cross-examine a video. The prosecution wasn't finished. On day 3, the courtroom doors opened and Dylan walked in. Chloe's husband. The investment banker my parents had always adored. Chloe's head snapped up and she started whispering frantically to her lawyer. Dylan walked to the witness stand and didn't look at his wife once. He testified that he'd filed for divorce 3 months earlier and was pursuing sole custody of their kids. He described Chloe coming home the week before that Saturday and bragging about how they were going to squeeze me until I broke. She told me that sacrificing Joshua's financial future was the only way to protect her inheritance, he said. She was willing to let her own niece be traumatized, or worse, so she wouldn't lose her lifestyle. Chloe's defense that she was an unwilling participant died right there. Then came Carter. His attorney had been arguing misplaced filial loyalty, a scared son following orders. The prosecution called a forensic accountant who'd spent 6 months digging through the company's frozen assets. While Robert Whitmore was funneling funds to cover gambling debts, his son Carter was simultaneously draining the company through embezzlement. Over 5 years, Carter approved fraudulent vendor invoices for services that never occurred, routing over $4 million into offshore accounts in his own name. The courtroom erupted. Robert's head snapped toward Carter. Genuine shock, then pure fury. He lunged across the defense table and got his hands on Carter's collar before the bailiffs pulled him back. Carter had his face buried in his arms, openly weeping. Diane sat completely still, watching the architecture of everything she'd built collapse into rubble in front of a jury. Robert's gambling had pushed the company to the edge. Carter had already hollowed it out. The $2.3 million I was supposed to sign would have fixed nothing. There was nothing left to save. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge looked down at the 4 of them and said, "In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen greed and cruelty quite like this. You viewed your own son not as a person, but as a financial instrument. And Robert Whitmore, you pressed a loaded firearm against the head of an innocent 4-year-old girl. Robert got 23 years in maximum security. Given his age, he's not coming home." Diane received 18 years. The judge specifically noted her laughing during the assault as evidence of a complete absence of empathy. Carter got 7 years for assault, kidnapping, and coercion, plus a separate federal embezzlement case that added another decade. Chloe took a plea deal, 5 years, and she lost custody of her kids. Dylan won. The civil suits came after. Veronica filed against everything they had left. Courts sided with us completely. The estate went to public auction. The company was liquidated. No inheritance. Nothing. 3 years have passed since that Saturday. We didn't stay in that house. Too much had happened in that living room for us to want to eat dinner in it. We sold the property, packed everything up, and moved 3 states over to a quiet coastal town where nobody had ever heard of Robert Whitmore, and nobody cared. I found a position at a local pediatric clinic with a team that genuinely respects the work. Mara was hired at a great elementary school inside a month. Our combined income is more than enough. We bought a house with a big backyard, a wooden swing set, and an ocean view from the back porch. Hazel is 7 now. She's in 2nd grade, obsessed with marine biology, and drags Mara and me to the local aquarium on weekends specifically to see the dolphins. She had some hard months after that Saturday. Nightmares. Waking up screaming in the dark. Scared of loud sounds. Mara and I spent a lot of nights sleeping on the floor next to her bed, holding her hand, telling her the loud man was locked away in a cage and could never come back. With time and patience and a whole lot of love, she came through it. She draws colorful dolphins in her sketchbooks now. Her laugh is back. She's a confident, happy, loudmouth 7-year-old who knows she is fiercely protected. Letters still arrive from the Department of Corrections every few months. Diane asking to speak to Hazel for 5 minutes, complaining about her cellmate. Robert demanding I call his appeals lawyer. I walk straight from the mailbox to the shredder in my home office and feed the envelopes in without opening them. I listen to the sound they make. It's a very satisfying sound. They are dead to me. That chapter is permanently closed. What I took from all of this is simple. Blood doesn't make a family. It just makes you related. Real family is built on respect and loyalty, and choosing each other when everything is hard. Mara holding us together when things were terrifying. Hazel trusting me to keep the monsters out. That's family. The rest was just genetics. I built the life they said I was too weak to build. And when they came to take it from me, I let them walk right through the front door and lock the cage behind them. Look, Joshua's story doesn't end with a clean bow on it. Hazel had rough nights for a while. The house had a bullet hole in the ceiling when they packed the moving truck. Real life doesn't do clean endings. But what this man did, quietly, methodically, while being told his whole life he was the disappointment, is about as cold and calculated as it gets. He didn't beg. He didn't fold. He built a trap, set the bait, and waited. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Could you have held it together in that moment? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. New stories drop every week.